Hello and welcome to Cognitive Dissidence with me, Niall Murphy. And for those of you who've been wondering where the hell I've been all this time, I had to take some time out. I suppose I got a bit paranoid and I got a bit freaked out because of Starmageddon. And despite me being here in the Philippines, I don't feel like I'm far enough away from the UK. As Elon Musk hasn't quite colonised Mars and I haven't escaped the Earth, right? I still feel like, I still feel the iron fist and I still feel the reptilian breath breathing down my neck, as it were. And so I thought, well, just take a bit of time out, you know, just to disappear, wipe the slate clean, start again. But now I finally decided, well, you know, without courage, what are any of us? Without courage, what are we? The way the world is going, I kind of feel I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least have some courage, right? And there's a number of things that I would like to talk about because a number of things have happened since I have not been on YouTube or social media, just in general, just sort of lurking in the background there. Right, so where do I start? Well, the first place I suppose I start is before I get to the main meat of this, which will be the protest which happened in Epping last month. As I speak, it's the 13th of August, 2025, for the record. But before I actually get to the protest that started last month, I want to start talking about this globalist collectivist model. Now, of course, this has been spoken about quite a lot, but it's a good segue into the point I wish to make. The Klaus Schwabocracy that they are constructing around the Western world, and of course, you know, Europe in particular, is based on the premise that they want a technocratic regime to run everything. Their scientific model is that we are machines, that the universe is mechanical. They don't seem to have any sense of the transcendent. For them, God is post-transhumanist human, and they pretty much live in a very non-transcendent and completely technocratic world where they think that just by tweaking us and engineering us, they can make us correct humans. They are there as a managerial class and we are all fungible units. Well, actually there is doublethink involved in the fungible units because they have created a two-tier system where, say, the indigenous people of Europe are, how can I say, less equal than the clients that they wish to bring in, or their lefty useful idiots, or their kind of governments that they have. So if you're someone who doesn't go along with the narrative, you are less equal than the other equal people. And if you're the people who go along with their narrative, or you're part of their grand scheme, as it were, you are more equal. But we're all equal, despite the fact that some people are more equal than others. You get my drift. We are all units, fungible units, and some of us are broken and must be fixed. So that's the thing, and they must fix us because they feel that they are entitled to do so because they are our managers and we are their broken pieces of machinery that need to be fixed. And that's about as far as they see us, really. They have no sense of the divine, they have no sense of the transcendent, they have no sense of the spiritual, nothing like that. That's all they are, and that's the only way that they see us human beings. We are either correct fungible units or we are incorrect fungible units. And as a result of this, the way they see us is, as they have kind of fucked up the reality that we live in, and created a world where it is financially, economically, or whatever, you know, culturally difficult for us in the Western world to reproduce at replacement rate. They think that their way of replacing the people of the future, the people of the present, is to bring lots of people in. And as we're all the same in their view, and we're all fungible units, and the magic air and magic soil of Europe will somehow make the people that they bring in to Europe be the same as all the people that they are supposed to be replacing in the future, because we're not going to breed fast enough. Therefore they think, well, that's okay then. That's all we need in order to tweak the GDP figures to keep everything going up, and that's about as far as they see. And they don't really see anything else. Our freedom, our lives, our sovereignty, our individuality, our own bespoke reality models mean nothing to them. Their narrative means everything. And that's really what it comes down to. Now, if we don't agree with them and we are skeptical or even rebellious of their system or whatever, then of course, rather than have a debate with us using watertight logical arguments that they can throw into the battle of ideas where the best argument wins or whatever, no, all they can do really is smear the people who don't agree with them. We can be racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, misogynistic, all the usual things. And well, the more we go into the future, the less people are falling for this bollocks. Basically, that's how it goes. And so with that model being there, at least in Europe, what is happening in the UK at the moment, and I go back to the 17th of July 2025, when the protests started in Epping. The Bell Hotel, which is up the road from Epping, in the rural outskirts of the town, was a hotel that people would stay at, tourists would stay at. There would be conferences, banquets and all of that. And then of course there would be, how can I say, people who would visit, stay there, foreign tourists or British staycationers who wanted to visit Epping Forest or whatever for a weekend or whatever would come along, stay there, and everything would be all right. And then I think it might have been winter at the end of 2024, in the dead of night, a bunch of migrants, what we would call boat people, right, who came on the inflatable dinghies, were stealthily placed into this hotel. And that's what it became. It's one of many, and this has been going on for quite a while now. Now, the people who live in Epping started noticing, of course, is a crime these days, isn't it, in the UK, right? That there was these rather sketchy gentlemen who were unfamiliar, not from round here. Nah, it's Essex. Not from round here, right? And they were stealing from the shops. There was increasing, apparently, according to anecdotal evidence that I've seen, increase in muggings, including muggings of school kids, diddling of the female school kids, intimidation, where women would get home to Epping Station after a day's work and then start phoning their husbands up to pick them up in the car to drive them home because they didn't feel safe walking home from work. And of course, at that time of the day, as it's close to winter solstice, they didn't feel like walking home from work in the dark and didn't really want to start walking home from work until either the days had lengthened in the evening in the early spring or the clocks had gone forward, all right? And I suppose after 6 months of this, they got a bit fed up of it. So they started protesting about this. Now, of course, the protest that they were doing, and if I go back to the year before, what historians would refer to as the Battle of Southport, the battle that Keir Starmer won as he just got in. What happened there, of course, was that after Axel Rudiker had basically gone on that savage spree of his, involving the deaths of 3 little girls, and a lot of anger spilled out across the UK, including riots, Starmer hijacked the narrative to say that everyone who was protesting in the aftermath of that were far-right thugs, and he set up these farcical kangaroo court judge jury trials that were going on for 24 hours a day, where people were coerced into pleading guilty for all sorts of things and just passing by protests, whether they did anything or not. And as a result of this, a lot of political prisoners happened. This set a precedent, a very bad precedent for UK justice. And of course, one of the casualties, one of the deaths of Starmer's political prisoners was Peter Lynch, who apparently didn't get involved in any of the violence himself, but ended up committing suicide in prison and is one of Starmer's casualties. One other person who didn't actually make it to the protest but got really angry and tweeted in rage, and although her tweet was probably inflammatory and not the nicest thing to say, she deleted it after 4 hours when she regretted what she posted, ended up in prison for, well, she was given a 36-month sentence. This was Lucy Connolly. I think it was 36 months. I might be a bit out by a couple of months or whatever. due to come out of prison very soon, and I'm no doubt she will end up being interviewed by a lot of people when she comes out. A childminder, wife of a Conservative councillor, grieved because one of her kids died. And when she heard about what happened, she was so possessed with rage. She said what she said on social media. Someone was offended by it. She was coerced to plead guilty, and then she ended up having a longer sentence than people who'd committed far more heinous crimes than her. And so she's coming out soon. And of course, the other main political prisoner that I would think within the last year as well at that time was Tommy Robinson, because of course he fits the bill, far-right thug, as I like to call him. Now, I would argue that I cannot find any evidence to suggest that Tommy Robinson is an ethno-nationalist or racist against all non-white people or a white supremacist. I know that his main issue is, of course, the Islamification of Luton, and of course that he had a cousin who ended up in one of those, being a victim of one of those gangs. And so he got involved in politics and became an activist for whatever reason. But after doing my research on him and actually watching hundreds of hours of everything that he has to say, I cannot, with my own eyes and my own discernment, find any evidence to suggest that he fits the mould of a white supremacist or an ethno-nationalist. Specifically those things, I cannot find any evidence to suggest that he is. Maybe he was a thug, football hooligan, whatever, granted, and I'm sure that he'd be the first to admit he was. But I cannot find any evidence to suggest that he does fit the mould that the mainstream media keep parroting all the time to put him into that bracket. But he became a political prisoner because he got put in prison for showing a film and breaking, I don't know, was it libel laws in the UK, whatever? It was a civil offence, not a criminal offence. And so he ends up in one of the most dangerous prisons in the whole of the UK, Wood Hill, put within a very special locked off bit in solitary confinement, but nevertheless knowing that he's in a prison where an enormous amount of the prisoners would kill him if they had a chance. And that, regardless of what you think of Tommy Robinson, for me is not adhering to the rule of law as we should expect the rule of law to be run in the UK, as the UK is supposed to be. And that is an issue. So there's 3 examples of what had happened within the year coming up to Epping. 6 months in to the people of the town of Epping being pissed off with what has happened, they just decided to start protesting. Now, what I wanted to know is, were the protesters really far right? And were the counter-protesters brought in really far left? And were the police doing one-tier policing without fear or favour, or was it a 2-tier policing system where they treated one group more favourably than the other group? So I watched a lot of hours of these videos. I watched, was it raw footage from people whose names I don't know. I watched videos from citizen journalists, including Emma Dunwell, Jack Hadfield, Will Coleshill of, what's it called again, Resistance GB. There was also Brother Wendell, who is Urban Scoop on, who does, he uploads to Tommy Robinson's channel. He's black, incidentally. If Tommy Robinson was actually an ethno-nationalist and a white supremacist, why would he employ Brother Wendell? Unless, of course, Tommy Robinson is blind and no one told him that he was black. It could be that. But no, I can see plenty of evidence that Tommy Robinson can see. All right? Anyway, that aside, Wesley Winter, did I mention him? Now, Wesley Winter, of course, is half Chinese looking. Will Coleshill is half black, I think, or half Asian. I think he's 50% ethnically British, right? Emma Dunwell has a black boyfriend. And one of the things that I kind of noticed about all these citizen journalists, a disproportionate amount of them, of course, who were people of colour or people of foreign racial origin, as they were going around interviewing all the protesters, no one called them any racist names, and no one told them to go back to their own country. And people were quite happy to answer the questions and talk to them about whatever was being put to them, I saw no evidence of racism there. And I think that's fair to say that that is good enough evidence to suggest that the protesters are not all far-right ethno-nationalists. Now, there may be a tiny smattering of them in there, and fair enough, but they were not one Borg-like collective of clones all holding a copy of a newspaper, Fascist Dictator Monthly. No, they weren't all holding mass-manufactured signs saying, you know, whites only or anything like that. No, I didn't see any evidence of that. They just seemed to be a smattering of ordinary people, and in the case, people who would not normally turn up at protests. But when you look at the counter-protesters who arrived, I noticed that when people tried to interview them, that they were either aloof or rude or abusive or nasty, and in some cases probably a little bit antagonistic and subtly violent. In fact, let me go over to a clip from a GB News presenter and how he was treated by the counter-protesters at a more recent event, and then I'll come back so you can give it an idea.
This is a problem we've had before as well, people putting their signs in front of our camera. It's a free press in this country. We just want to speak to people where we can. This man trying to do the same. But there we go. I mean, all we can do is our jobs, Michelle. All we can do is our jobs. This chap very agitated. But what he hasn't got, unfortunately, is a voice. He's failing to come forward and speak to us. He doesn't want to do that. He just wants to agitate next to me. So why are you protesting today? Are you from Aldershot?
No comment.
No comment. It's like it's a police interview. But there we go, Michelle. We've done what we can, trying to speak to people gathering here. They don't want to engage with us. We might go back on the other side and see if we can get some more interviews later. We'll join you later in the programme.
Right, so that seems to be, in my research, typical behaviour of those people. Now, these counter-protesters or counter-protesters like them turned up to Epping Station with a BBC journalist ready to interview one of the people from the counter-protest. Notice that sort of thing happened. And when the citizen journalists, often unknown citizen journalists, were going around trying to, you know, how can I say, interview them in an impartial way, trying to steel man their position, they were all rude and hostile to them all and, you know, saying all sorts of things. Now, on the other side of this, when known journalists from the mainstream who had a reputation, who had previously gone out of their way to smear them as far-right protesters, turned up, they were hounded out. Probably because they were known that this is what they would do. They would try to frame it as to misrepresent the protests. They were known about, and these protesters actually did, you know, not the counter-protesters, the normal protesters, hounded the mainstream media out. They were okay and happy to talk to all the citizen journalists, irrespective of their ethnic origin or their colour. And this is one of the things that I noticed with a lot of these protesters when they were interviewed. With Wesley Winter, he did actually do a lot of videos, and one of the things I kind of noticed was that a lot of the time, the counter-protesters were brought through residential streets, you know, not crescents or cul-de-sacs, but maybe double-ended part-through roads, normal residential quiet streets. Now, bear in mind that the town had been in a bit of shock because, I have to say allegedly, because of their stupid bloody laws, right? A girl was diddled by a 38-year-old Ethiopian man. A court case is still going on, right, about that. And so the town was in shock about this happening, and it probably, you know, for all I know, wasn't the only incident. It probably wasn't the only thing, according to anecdotal evidence from the people of Epping. And so they were in shock about this, and as far as the locals were concerned, they were protesting about this hotel because of an apparent sexual assault that happened to a schoolgirl. And then the counter-protesters were brought in to go past their quiet suburban streets shouting things like, "Nazi scum off our streets." These counter-protesters paid for their, their banners paid for, bought, mass-produced, given to them. And apparently, as far as I know, the National Lottery, as well as, I think, one of the councils of Bristol, finance Stand Up to Racism, also, you know, money funded from Socialist Worker. they all had the same banner. Now, there was one of two banners that I saw. One was by Stand Up to Racism, one was by Socialist Worker. They were all carrying, pretty much, well, most of them, were carrying and displaying their Socialist Worker magazines, like their little, what you call it, virtue signalling newspapers. Who reads Socialist Worker? Everyone in the UK knows. It should be called Communist Worker, because that's pretty much what they are. Now, if these protesters had bothered to do their research, to go into town and be journalists and ask random people in Epping what happened, why are you protesting, you know, what actually happened, and find out the backstory and then work out whether or not it would be appropriate to protest, and then they'd have done a protest, you know, based on that, then that would have been fine. But they didn't. They know nothing about Epping. They're just being paid. They're brought in. It's probably a question of needing the money, isn't it? To shout Nazi scum off our streets, stop the far right, and all that. And it doesn't seem appropriate to me that a town in shock because of sexual assaults, intimidations, muggings and thievings that have been going on from a bunch of strange men in the town, irrespective of where they've come from, has caused them to protest, only for counter-protesters to be counter-protesting against protesters who are protesting against a paedophile. Excuse the gap there, the transition. I've got noisy neighbours and I'm hoping that all this stuff isn't picking up too loud on the microphone. I might have to filter this video through dialogue denoise, that's the only trouble. But nevertheless, where was I? Yes, so these people are coming in and accusing people protesting against paedophiles of being far right, knowing nothing about their town, knowing nothing about their backstory, knowing nothing about anything. You can imagine the locals would be really pissed off with that. So with a bit of help from the police, who were treating them with kid gloves while the police were actually being violent to the normal protesters, which then ended up with the riot on July the 17th, things got pretty badly out of hand. But before they could actually frame this as far-right thugs, enough citizen journalists had filmed enough and released enough of this footage so that that narrative did not stick. And over the next few days, the women and girls of Epping had decided that they were going to improve the optics of the protests by leading them and you know, doing interviews to the citizen journalists, and those interviews ended up being played on Talk TV, and they ended up being played on Sky News Australia, and they got round to a lot of the main YouTubers. So in the end, the mainstream media couldn't really hijack that narrative, and now, ever since then, there are now tons of these protests going on all around Britain. But they're still bringing out the counter-protesters, and they're still trying to spin it that everyone are far-right thugs, and no one believes it anymore. Absolutely no one really of any worth believes anymore that the entire working class white people of the UK are far-right thugs. Really? I mean, honestly, are you want to tell me that 50 or 60% of Indigenous Brits are, you know, bother boot wearing, jackboot wearing, shaved head, swastikaed, goose stepping Nazis? You really want to tell me that? Are you going to get me to believe that at all? Are you going to get anyone to believe that at all? No, it's just utter bollocks. It's just complete utter bollocks, isn't it? Who's going to believe that? No one. But they still don't give up trying to spin that narrative. And it just seems quite coincidental that within a week or two that came in, a new bill turned to an act, the Online Safety Act, came into the UK to censor the internet, to put the UK internet on child settings. And in order for you to override the child settings, you have to upload your sensitive information to private companies that work on behalf of the government that have a record of being hacked and sensitive information being leaked out. So, of course, people on the dark web will be able to sell your identity, and that increases the chances of bribery, blackmail, extortion, thievery, and all of that. And those people, those criminals, that criminal underworld, and anyone who gets involved in that criminal underworld will be less detectable than you will be if you're a law-abiding citizen. But they don't care about child safety. We know they don't. They're just using that as a ruse. But nevertheless, despite that, the thing is that they're not going to stop the truth getting out. And if it does scare people off the internet, the one redeeming factor of that will be that people will get out of their houses more. They'll meet people more in real life. They'll talk to each other. They'll build more communities. They'll probably decide to get pubs together. They'll probably vet the people who come into the pubs. And with these secret police, the offendotrons that wish to complain about offensive conversations that are going on with this new banter bill that they want, is that the new banter law that they want to bring in to stop people from speaking freely in pubs? I'm sure that enough people and enough community cohesion can be born out of that to prevent that from this happening. And people will get together, communities will be brought together, they'll be forced together to have real life conversations with each other offline, to organise. And this is something that could happen. There could be a blessing in disguise that could be born out of all this tyranny that is being brought in. So this is the time that a lot of the normies will wake up. I hope to see that. And it may be a really tough time as we go into the future, as they try to bring in a digital gulag, right, for everyone to live under. But with that in mind, what will definitely happen is that a lot of people will get together and they will carry on with these protests, and they won't stop until this problem is dealt with. And they'll still, you know how it goes, the legacy media and the lefties and the usual bollocks, they will still try to say it's racism and all of that. They won't stop, they will keep going, because they are utterly relentless, despite that their propaganda and despite that their narratives are utter bollocks and no one believes them anymore. They will still keep going until it gets to the point where no one believes it anymore. And I suppose the only way to change the system is for enough people to get together and to talk, for enough people to, how can I say, to have meetings, for enough people to set up pressure groups and build communities, meet in, whether it's churches or community centres or town halls or any of these things, for people to do talks, to build networks, to join with other networks, and for a lot of different groups of people who are going to become the new dissident class to find a way of networking with each other so that it can all converge and change the narratives, and for people to talk to councillors and for people to talk to local councils as well, and for people to have it be known that they will not stand for this. And as a result, I can see the UK, basically balkanising between the countryside and the cities. And as a result, there will be people who will say, oh, these people over there are Nazis. But of course, that narrative won't stick, because not Nazis. It's clear as mud they're not Nazis, right? And that is the thing. I think that, scaring people off the internet will make people meet in real life. And, what are they going to do then? When they close the hotels, are they going to attempt then to get these excessive amounts of boat people that they think that they need to keep bringing in because of this globalist collectivist paradigm that they have to live under, and this anachronistic economic model that they believe they have to do in order to fiddle GDP numbers? Where are they going to put them? They've run out of space. And the UK will run out of money. And the reason why they are becoming so extremely oppressive right now is because they know that no one believes them. They know that they cannot carry this on. And this is what happens when regimes are about to fall to pieces. They go from being just, liberal democracy governments in order to becoming oppressive regimes, and they push harder and harder. There is no nation state in the UK anymore. There is the nation, the people of the country, and there is the state, infiltrated and run by traitors. The nation and the state have become enemies with each other. You've got the state run by infiltrators. You've got the blunt instruments of the state, the police who have been put through all these, and the civil service and all of these organisations where the people who've got into them have been put through these woke institutions so they can demonstrate how anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-misogynistic they are in order to rise up the ranks. they're just activists. You've got the police have been put through the College of Policing, so the top brass of them have all been vetted through these woke stuff to get to the top. Their foot soldiers are demoralised and probably don't want to do it and are looking forward to retiring. They're having a hard time actually keeping the police there. The top brass of the armed forces are getting there, and there are now sort of glitches and schisms between your common squaddy or your common foot soldier and your common sort of like constable compared to the top brass of the police and the army. There's a schism forming there too. There are even a couple of MPs who, don't like the way the system are running. At the moment, you have Rupert Lowe. In the previous Parliament, you had Andrew Bridgen. This will only get more and more prevalent as time goes on, as we get into the future. And then there'll be more and more organisations that will set up in the future that will become anti-globalist and more pro-British and more pro-nationalist, not necessarily ethno-nationalist, because that's not a good way to go. Everyone knows that's not a good way to go. But nevertheless, people will be concerned about the actual nation state and how it is being, people who are hiding behind good deeds like anti-racism, anti-sexism, child protection and all that, are abusing their power and doing bad things. And enough people will wake up to this and they will do something about it, I think, as time goes on. But it will not be easy. It will be a very messy and probably very tyrannical 5 years as we go forward into this Schwabocracy. That's the thing.
The future is built by us.
No, it bloody isn't.
So, what I also would like to talk about is, of course, steel manning the other side. Because for me, as far as this is concerned, in order for us to be able to transcend this mess that the globalists have put upon us, it has to become beyond left and right. We have to somehow reach some of the people on the other side, the lefties if you like, and join with them and bring ourselves back to the centre as we move the Overton window away from the left. And to give you a good example of this, it's that you've got people in The Guardian now, that the most lefty and most woke rag of all, complaining about the Online Safety Act 2. You've got people, pro-Palestine people on the left complaining about the Online Safety Act. You've got pro-LGBTQ activists complaining about that now. So to steel man the left. Recently, I don't know, you may know this, there's the group Palestine Action, and to me they're just nothing more than a bunch of lefty nutter, sort of like direct action types. I don't see them as any worse than Just Stop Oil, and I don't see them as any worse than Extinction Rebellion. As far as I know, all they've done is use spray paint, and cause a bit of criminal damage, and use spray paint and stuff like that to cause the damage that they have done. They have not blown anything up yet. They have not killed anyone yet. They have not committed atrocities yet, but they were turned into a prescribed terrorist organisation, nevertheless. Now, of course, when it comes to the whole Israel-Palestine thing, that's a bit iffy and messy for me. I don't really know what to do with that. When it comes to me being of an Irish background and, being called IRA bomber as a nickname when I was at school, but nevertheless, having a dual perspective of the troubles in Northern Ireland when I was a kid and still not knowing what and what not to do. I didn't want to take the side of the IRA because I thought that blowing people up was wrong. I didn't want to take the sides of the Ulster freedom fighters or anything like that because I thought blowing up the other side was wrong. I wanted it all to stop. And I was glad that my parents were from the Republic of Ireland, not Northern Ireland, because I kind of felt that in my mind I was one step removed from that. And so as a result of that, I look at Israel and Palestine and I consider that I don't know what to think about that. I think it's bad what's happening, yes. I think that what they did on October the 7th, 2023? What happened there was bloody awful. I mean, I've been to psytrance parties and I did not like to see a bunch of psytrancers being massacred like that. That was horrifying because that was a little bit too close to the bone for me. That Nova Festival looked so similar to the Boom Festival. And I bet that I was literally 1 degree of separation away from people that I knew personally. That people I knew personally in the past would have been friends with people who would have been killed at that event. So I was, irrespective of whether they were Jews or not, I didn't like to see that. That was horrifying. And so when I saw the pro-Palestinians marching, dismissing all of that, I was horrified by that. Nevertheless, there are people who are, anti-Israel, pro-Palestine, and provided they are not affiliated with terrorist organisations, I still think that they are entitled to their views and should be entitled to a protest. And if only they were a bit less overzealous, why can't they come and talk to the pro-Israel people and have an intellectual discussion, and we can be free to talk about this stuff in the battle of ideas? Why can't that happen? And I still think that it should be okay to steelman the other side in this case. As Palestine Action had not killed anyone, they're not like Hamas, they hadn't done anything so gratuitous and savage as Hamas had done on October the 7th, why should they, as yet, having no track record of killing anyone or blowing anyone up, be a prescribed terrorist organisation? And why should doctors, middle-class people who are, sitting down protesting with homemade banners in what looks like an organic protest that has got nothing to do with the Stand Up to Racism or Socialist Worker, here's a picture of that, why should they be arrested for just sitting down peacefully and protesting because they don't think that a group that hasn't blown anyone up or killed anyone yet should be a prescribed terrorist organisation? Because if they'll do that to one side, they'll do it to the other side, won't they? What's to stop them from, how can I say, putting a few infiltrators into the Epping protests, masked men or whatever, and say, look, all those far-right thugs, we're going to turn them into a prescribed terrorist organisation as well. What's to stop them doing that too? You see? So my argument is that the Online Safety Act and prescribing a group of people who have not blown anyone up or killed anyone yet as a prescribed terrorist organisation is as much of a problem for people on the left as it is for people on the right. And I would quite happily steelman the arguments of some of my political opponents, right, as well as the people who I agree with when it comes to stuff like that, because I kind of think that in a democracy or in a world where we value free speech, we should value the opinions of our adversaries. Now, if people are abusing this to take freedoms away, to incite bad things, to burn things down, like the way the Black Lives Matter and the Antifa people have actually done bad things, I can understand turning those people into prescribed terrorist organisations that should be made illegal. When people they're protesting but they're pro-Hamas and actually advocating to kill Jews, I can understand people like that being turned into a prescribed terrorist organisation. Fair enough. But them being turned into blunt instruments and useful idiots of the state to be made into counter-protesters against people who are not really far right, you can see there is a discrepancy, there are a few inconsistencies, there are a few problems there, are there not? And it does make me feel quite passionate. It does make me feel very, very pissed off. And it does make me feel that the Western world is fucked and I can't live in the Western world anymore. And I'm glad I got the fuck out, yes. And if you have the means to do so, I'm going to hand you over to my namesake, another Murphy. Listen to what he has to say.
Get the fuck out!
Yeah, I would do that if I were you. And if you don't want to get the fuck out and you want to stay there, then fair enough. I'm not against anyone and we shouldn't be pitted against each other. I just hope that the Western world can see their way through this and that through the means of argumentation, debate, talking and civilised means with no violence, with no aggression or the least amount of aggression possible, with stoicism, who can stand there and actually not be poked and not hurt and not react to you having the buttons pushed from antagonists. If it can be done in a civilised and a good way, that enough people out there can stand up and that the right people with influence, enough of the right people with influence, can find the courage. People in the political classes, you know, well-to-do people, people in the political classes, people who are, you know, decent people who have power, who have influence, who have consciences, can find the courage to help turn this around and shift the Overton window back to a more neutral place, where we understand that when we had Hitler, when we had like Stalin and Mao, we got to the point in the past where we said never again. And I grew up, when I was 18, and I saw Václav Havel in the old Czechoslovakia being put in prison for writing satirical poetry about the regime that he was mocking time and time again. And the bloody regime, what can I say, the pre-Blair regime at the end of the Cold War, was telling me, the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, the Conservative Party, back then, were telling me that Václav Havel was a hero for being a dissident, for standing up against an authoritarian regime. And then it fell and he became president. In the modern day, Václav Havel would be called far right by the very, very same people who run those institutions now in the Western world. What the fuck happened? Where did you go wrong? It just makes me absolutely sick to my stomach to see that this has happened, right? And so I would like to see change. In the meantime, fuck the Western world until it can get its act together. I didn't just get out before. I mean, my plan to get out of the Western world goes right the way back to before COVID. I only left the Western world because I didn't see a future there. I didn't see myself having a future there. I'm married to a Filipina. I didn't feel that because of the atomized nature and the ideological feminism of the women in the UK, that I had a chance in hell of meeting someone I could stay with there and settling down. I left because I didn't have a future, but this was well before all this happened. You know? But now, after all this time, I'm looking and seeing what's happening to that country that I left. I don't want to set foot in there. I don't want to go near there now. I just don't. It makes me sad and it breaks my heart. So, if you are someone in the UK who wishes to stay and fight, and you care about your own country, then all I would ask you to do is behave yourselves while you find a way of changing things and turning things round. What else can be done? You know? Don't do anything you shouldn't do. It's not big and it's not clever. Be civilised about this, but find a way, because it can't go forward like this. Otherwise there's no future there for fucking anyone, is there? Right. I shall just knock off now. Excuse me getting a little bit emotional. See you later, alligator. See you soon, a baboon.